everyone.
Welcome back again.
Well,
another session.
Yes. Seed to Harvest Summit. Here we come. Man, we are rolling through these sessions one at a time, and hope you've been enjoying them as much as we are.
There's so much good information.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. All right, so we're going to jump into this session in which we have a special guest, again, Jill Ragan, coming up very soon, but we also have a giveaway, and everyone always tries to guess the winning word of the giveaway. But in this session, let's do insect. Okay, so check your spelling. See how well you guys can spell. And we are giving away an Insectanet. So you can look on the screen if you need to know how to spell it. Insectanet. This is insect protection netting. And do you want to describe what it's like, Dad, to use it?
Well, it's just a very fine net, and it keeps the insects out of your crop.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
And I think you see the use case right there in the picture.
Unlike a row cover, it's not going to add any like protection as far as, I mean, if anything, it would add a little bit of shade.
Right.
Yeah. But it could be a very good and effective way to keep insects out of your bed, especially when your plants are small or if they're greens and you don't need pollinators in there.
Yeah, until your crop starts flowering, if it will flower, it's the perfect thing to use.
Yep. All right, there you can see a little bit closer what that Insectanet looks like. So someone will win the Insectanet. Are you ready?
It's kind of like a heavy-duty mosquito net, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. All right, 3, 2, 1, and the winner is dun 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 dun. Here we go, Nicole. You know,
congratulations.
I keep saying y'all's first names because I'm very self-conscious of completely slaughtering your last names. It's like being at the airport when they're trying to say someone's name over the intercom and they have absolutely no clue how to say the person's last name. Nicole, please email support@seedtime.us and we will make sure that you get your bonus Insectanet. Congratulations. Very excited for you. All right, now just before we introduce our guest speaker, quick shout out to our sponsor today, which is Earth Medicine. And my Earth Medicine is quite popular, we have found out today. They sold out of their 7-pound bags like on the session, basically. And then they have added in more stock, which you are basically pre-ordering, and they'll fulfill it within 7 days. They'll get it fulfilled. So they'll fulfill it pretty quickly for you, but they, boom, sold out of the stuff they had on hand.
Just got a note, they have 1,100 7-pound bags available now.
Yeah, that's for the pre-order that I was just telling you about. So you can grab it now while you can. And then there's a link down below this video where you can get 10% off, and we'll play a short little video from them, and then we'll get rolling. All right. Yeah. So click the link below to grab your earth medicine. And now we're going to introduce our guest speaker today, who is Jill Ragan. Jill has become a great friend of ours. She's the owner of Whispering Willow Farm and the author of The Tiny But Mighty Farm and the Tiny Farm Planner. And she lives with her husband and kids in Arkansas, runs a little farm herself. Literally, Jill does this day in and day out. So welcome, Jill. Thanks for joining us. And we're excited to hear your presentation today on more about dealing with bugs in the garden. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be chatting with y'all today.
We are very excited to have you. So one quick little note is feel free to ask questions just to the audience. Feel free to ask questions as we go along or as Jill shares her presentation, I should say. And we'll be starring those. We'll have a little Q&A time similar to all of the other sessions that we have done. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and drop backstage, Jill, and we'll let you take it away. How does that sound?
Let's do it. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I am so excited, even though I can't see you all, I'm so excited that y'all could join today as we chat through some sustainable solutions, right? I feel like pest control is one of those things that I really don't get to talk about often enough as I would like to. It's one of those things that I feel like often kind of takes the back seat when it comes to gardening, but really should be at the forefront, because the truth is when we are thinking about managing our pests organically, it isn't just about protecting our plants, while that is a vital part, right? We're really trying to create this balanced ecosystem. And so in today's session, we are going to talk just about that, how I have done this. We're going to cover those foundational principles of organic pest control. We're going to talk about healthy soil. We're going to talk about choosing the right varieties, the importance of crop rotation, how to use some simple, effective tools, and really just go into some specifics on what I do and use in my own garden. And my hope is that by the end of this session, you guys are going to have all the tools in your toolkit necessary to really manage this pest in the upcoming season with confidence. And I feel like that's something that I notice often. I didn't realize how often pests really discourage people in the garden. It was a lot of times, I've been doing this for over a decade, I get, oh, I can't grow anything, or oh, my plants don't thrive. Very rarely do you hear someone just like giving up because of pests. But when you really start diving into those conversations, you realize that most people deal with this. They just don't know the right solution. So Paul did a great job of introducing me, so I appreciate that. But again, a quick overview. This is my husband, Nathan. We farm in central Arkansas on a little over 4 acres. We've got 4 kids. I did write my book, The Tiny But Mighty Farm, and my planner, The Tiny Farm Planner. But so much of what we do and our heart behind our business in Whispering Willow Farm is this right here. I love educating. I love teaching. I love inspiring. I truly believe that when we can all unify together as a community, sky's the limit of what we're capable of. So I'm just really excited to hang out with you guys today. So I just chatted with you guys about what we're going to be talking about. So let's just dive in on the forefront. All right. The first thing we need to address is healthy soil. In fact, in my book, The Tiny But Mighty Farm, I have an entire chapter, and the chapter is titled Soil is the Life and Longevity of Your Farms and Your Gardens. And I really do believe that. Healthy soil is going to be the foundation of any sort of organic pest management system that you're trying to establish in your garden. All right. So even the best pest control practices, or you might have it, if you're here, you probably don't have it figured out, but I'm going to give you the tools you need. But some of these things you'll notice are going to fail. And it's really because you've got to start with the soil. And if you can really create an environment where plants can thrive, then the pests are less likely to take over. Now, I feel like I knew this for a good while, right? I've been growing food and gardens for quite some time, but I was actually watching a documentary and I heard someone say obviously pests derive from the soil, and we all know that. But if you are having massive pest issues, you first need to look at your soil. And for some reason, just the way she worded it really resonated with me. I would say we've done such a good job at creating and building an organic pest management system for our garden and our farm through the principles I'm going to talk with you about today, that I don't deal with a lot of these, but we focus so heavily on these things. And I believe that soil should always be your first line of defense when it comes to managing pests organically. And one of the ways I like to think about our soil is think of it as like the immune system for your plants. All right. So when the soil is rich in nutrients, it has a good structure, it supports that, diverse microbial life, plants are stronger. And when your plants are stronger, that's really when they're going to become more resilient against pests. So you'll notice maybe you have a plant in your garden and it's not really thriving, maybe a few things are off. You'll notice that almost immediately those pests are going to attack that plant. Why is that? It's because it has more stress and it hasn't really built up the resilience to those things. And so I cannot tell you enough how important healthy soil is. It's just going to help support those plants to where they can naturally do what they're supposed to do, which is fend off the pest. And some of the ways we can do that is just with the key elements that we're adding into our soil, right? So we're adding compost, organic matter, making sure that the pH levels are where they need to be. And when you do that, these healthy plants are less attractive to the pest, right? Because they can produce more natural compounds on their own that are going to deter the pest from ever even trying to dive in. Now, one thing that I cannot express enough. In fact, I was consulting with someone yesterday, and she was telling me that she thinks she needs to just tear down her whole garden because her plants aren't thriving as much. They've become year after year more susceptible to pests. And I asked her, well, what does your soil say? Have you done a soil test? Do you know? And she had never done that. And that was kind of surprising to me. And some of you guys might be in the same boat where you've just never conducted a soil test. So you have no idea what your soil's lacking in. Therefore, you don't have those happy plants because maybe you are missing the compost or the organic matter. Maybe your nitrogen's off, your calcium's off. There's so many different things. And so the practice that we do on our farm, one, a soil test can be super easy. There are actually tests that can ship straight to you. You can gather the soil, you can mail them off, and they'll email you the results. A lot of people have local extension offices that they can drop their soil off to, and they will test it and, mail you back the results. We practice it kind of twice a year. If you can do it every single season, I recommend that. But a lot of time, those spring and summer crops kind of roll together, and then our fall and winter crops roll together. And so we are always, right now, we're actually conducting our soil test, and we're figuring out before we're planting for the spring, what is our soil lacking? How do we build its immune system to where we know when we have those healthy plants go into the soil, they're going to naturally deter those pests because the soil, the base, the immune system of our gardens is intact. And so if you do not do this, I highly, highly recommend that you do this. Get you a soil test, figure out what it's lacking, add those nutrients in. You can also use cover crops in the off season. So maybe you're not growing year round. You could in the fall and the winter plant different ones. Maybe you don't grow in the spring. You're always just thinking about not leaving your soil bare. When it's bare, it's exposed. And so you really want to make sure that if you're not planting in it, you're adding some sort of nutrients back in it. And so that's one of the main practices. That's our first line of defense when it comes to managing pests organically, is making sure you have healthy, thriving soil. So on top of the soil test, on top of giving it all of its key nutrients, because we are growing year round, we want to make sure that we're constantly feeding that soil throughout the season as well. So we're amending the soil based off of our soil test, but then we're feeding and we're nurturing our soil throughout the year as well. And there's a lot of different options that you can use for this. We just use a prebiotic and we'll just like have it injected through our drip irrigation. You could get some that's foliar fed. There's a lot of different options there. So even throughout the growing system, throughout the growing season, you're still nurturing your soil. So I cannot recommend enough. We're going to start with a good immune system. We're going to start with a good base, and that absolutely has to start with healthy soil. Then once you've really kind of figured out and you've dived into your soil and you have that right, then we really move into choosing the right varieties. And when you can select those right varieties, you are just being super proactive, right? It's a proactive way to avoid the pest problems because there are certain varieties that are going to be disease resistant, that are going to be pest resistant. This is going to save you a lot of time. So when you're choosing the right varieties, you're just saving yourself the trouble, right? Because this is where, y'all don't come at me, I do grow heirlooms, but I grow a lot of hybrids for this specific reason. And one of the things I just want to talk about is hybrid does not mean that it is genetically modified, right? And I think that's one of the first things that people think of is, I myself included in this when I was starting out growing, I refused to grow a hybrid because I just didn't think that's what you did. Like my papaw grew heirlooms, everyone I knew grew heirlooms. And so that had to be the way you did it. But then as I started dealing with some of this disease in my garden, I started getting overtaken by pests. I realized maybe there's another option. And that's when I started really leaning into choosing the right varieties. I will say the first year that I decided I was going to go all in, I was going to grow only specific hybrid varieties that were very pest and disease resistant for the types of pest and disease I was dealing with in my garden. It was the first year I grew and I had not a single pest. I didn't have aphids. I didn't have cabbage moths. Like I didn't have any sort of pest year round. And I do believe it was partially to the things that I've implemented in the system that I'm telling you. And a large part of it was due to choosing the right varieties to combat against that. And so a hybrid is just going to offer a greater resistance to these things versus an heirloom is obviously we're growing that for its flavor, its diversity, but it might require a little bit more work. It might be more susceptible to pests. So I teach this a lot, right? I teach about choosing the right varieties. And I also get a lot of pushback from that, rightfully so. And so I thought last year, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to grow. I do a lot of growing in high tunnels, which again, it's a different type of environment. And so therefore I need to choose the right type of varieties that can withstand that environment. So I thought I'm going to do a test and I'm going to grow an heirloom tomato right next to a hybrid tomato that has been kind of bred specifically to be more resistant to these things. And I'm going to do the same. We're going to treat the soil the same. We're going to do the same trellising techniques, all the same maintenance and maintaining techniques, and we're going to see what happens to see if it really kind of proved my point that choosing the right varieties has a large part of being successful in organic pest management. We were not even halfway through the growing season, and I had to rip out those tomato plants because the white flies, the aphids were so invasive that they were literally spreading to all of my other crops. So 1000%, I'm not saying don't grow heirlooms, but say maybe you've got a goal this year for your garden and you want to can a lot of tomatoes. You want to have diced tomatoes, you want to have ketchup, you want to have tomato paste, you want to have all of these things, and you know that production is a goal in that regards. I really recommend growing a variety that you know is going to be just bred to fight that off better. Because the truth is, if that's how you're planning on preserving it and you're not so much thinking about eating it fresh, you're going to be able to add all sorts of stuff. You can add onions, you can add peppers, you can add things to enhance that flavor. And then maybe choose an heirloom for something that you're not having so many large goals or preserving goals on. And so think about that. I really encourage you guys to think about that. And so also I would note to pay attention to your climate and your microclimates when selecting zones or selecting seeds, because some things are going to do better in some zones versus other ones. And when you can, again, figure out what your zone is, what varieties grow well, you're going to create a healthier plant. And we just learned that the healthier your plants are, the less likely you're going to have pests. And so when you're thinking and you're rummaging through those seed catalogs, I know so many of us are doing that right now, evaluate your goals and look for those varieties that are going to be disease resistant. Maybe you deal with powdery mildew every, year. Maybe you're dealing with blight. Maybe you're dealing with aphids. Maybe you have flea beetles. Like whatever it is that you're dealing with, try to find a variety that will combat against that well, and it's known for that. And just grow it. You won't ever know if the flavor is different or how it produces or how it does until you try it. So I really encourage you guys, choose the right varieties. I think you will be so surprised. One of the things that I do as well when it comes to managing just pest organically, and I think I might chat about this later too in our session, but thinking about when you're rummaging through your seed catalogs and you're building out what you're going to buy, think about trap crops. A trap crop is essentially like a sacrificial plant. And I did this the first few years. I haven't done this in a while because I haven't needed to. We've really dialed in our soil so well that we just don't deal with pests like we used to. But essentially, you're growing a variety of something. Think of it as kind of like companion planting. So eggplant. Where I live in my zone, my little microclimate that I'm growing in, eggplant is a beautiful trap crop. And while I'm not growing it with the intention of how it's enhancing flavor or the beneficial insects, while you can do that, companion planting is a great way to try to naturally fend off pests and deter those pests. I like to plant trap crops, and these are my sacrificial crops that all of those pests will just gravitate to. And I don't harvest anything off of these. I don't try to harvest anything off of them. I grow them just with the intent that they are going to attract all of the pests so that they leave all of my other high-producing crops and varieties alone. And it works really, really well. Sometimes too, with the tomato I just talked about, it had gotten so bad that it no longer just became a sacrificial plant. It was spreading to everything. So I had to rip that plant out. But typically you're not doing this. You're controlling it. And so you can control it. They're all going to attack that one specific crop. And then they leave all of your other stuff alone. That method has worked really good for us, especially if you can also plant those companion plants that you know are going to do really well, and then just say, you know what, I'm going to throw this in just in case. It's a really great way, especially if you have some extra space, to be able to do that. And then the next thing I want to talk about when it comes to just organic pest management is practicing crop rotation. I feel like this does not get enough attention. Kind of like the soil, kind of like the whole topic. I'm so proud of you guys for showing up today, because I know that these aren't the funnest topics to talk about, but they're so crucial when it comes to the success of your gardens. But crop rotation, I feel like, does not get enough love, and it's so simple. If you've ever grown a garden in your life, right now, today, with very little knowledge, you can practice and implement crop rotation, and you are going to see a positive impact from that. I love that. I love knowing that I can do something and I'm going to immediately almost see results from it. And it's so easy to do. And it's really, I view crop rotation as just a cornerstone for pest management, because what you're doing when you're rotating crops is you're breaking the pest cycle. So you're making it harder for those pests to establish themselves, and it just makes it so much easier for the plants that you are growing to survive. So many of the pests are host specific, okay, meaning that they rely on a specific crop to survive. So when you're rotating these crop-like families, so let's say you're moving tomatoes to beans, And the next season, you can essentially starve out the pests that will overwinter. That's a lot of the things you'll realize is these pests are just overwintering in the soil. And then they're just waiting for springtime to come around. They're waiting for that favorite host. And then they're going to spring up and they're going to attack. But if you essentially switch them and you psych them out, then they're like, oh, hey, this isn't, the plant I was just feeding off of. So they've come up, from winter and they realize that it's different. And so what that looks like for me is I try to just always flop beds, which I cannot encourage you guys enough. So much of a successful garden, whether you're wanting to grow a ton of yields, whether you're wanting to deal with pest management organically, is you have to plan. Your garden is only going to be as productive as the thought and the intention that you put into it. And so plan it out. It's so easy. And this can take very, very little time. And so let's say on my 2 outer beds, I typically will grow, all my root crops in my right side in the fall and the winter. So that means come springtime, I'm going to grow those on the left side. And I'm going to swap my tomatoes and my cucumbers every time. And I'm going to swap my maybe tomatoes and my beans. And you're just making sure that you're avoiding growing the same crop in the same spot year after year. Now, what that looks like for me, because I've got my same little small garden spots, you will eventually rotate back around, but you've psyched those pests out enough to where it typically doesn't matter. And so I've got 4 little quadrants in my high tunnel, and I just literally rotate them in a square, and then we start right back and we do the same process. And then those 2 outer beds, they get flopped with root crops and brassicas year after year, year after year. And you're just breaking that pest cycle, and it works really well because you're just reducing that pest population because you're disrupting their lifestyle. Not only when you do that, you're preventing soil nutrient depletion. I see so many times people will plant the same crops in the same bed and they don't do soil tests. And so they're never replenishing the soil. I think of it again so much. I compare our gardens to our bodies, but if you're depleting yourself of nutrients, at some point you're just not going to thrive. You're going to start to break down. You're going to start to get tired. You're going to start to wilt, essentially, right? And so it's so important to make sure that you're adding nutrients. You're feeding your garden. It's a living thing. You're feeding your garden just like you're feeding yourself. And so if I always only planted tomatoes in the same spot and I never fed that soil, not only are the pests going to be a lot, more intense because I've never disrupted that life cycle, I've never broke that pattern for them, I am just depleting the soil of all of those nutrients, which means my plants aren't going to be near as happy. And we already know from earlier in this session that when your plants are stressed out, then they're more susceptible to pests anyways. So this is a very, very easy practice that you can implement no matter how big, how small of a garden that you have, that I just really encourage everyone do. The next one, I'm so glad that this was their giveaway for this session because I use insect netting. It's like my little companion, okay? This is one of those things that I do not go without ever because it is such an essential tool in my opinion. And so it's such an essential tool for me. I started farming before my husband started farming with me. And so I needed the easiest, most effective way to handle a problem or to do something when it comes to trellising, when it comes to management. And so insect netting became my go-to because it was so easy for me to assemble myself and it was so effective. It is a fantastic way to prevent the problem before they ever even start. So you can see here at the top right, it is like a shield. It is kind of like a mosquito net. And there's a few different ways you can do it. You can see there's PVC pipe here that's been bent. What we actually do is we will buy a roll of 9-gauge wire. And we will cut these hoops to the length or to the widths of our beds. Now, another thing about this system that I love is you've got a one-time investment of however, you want to do your hoops, whether you choose a wire or a PVC pipe will determine, your price point, and you buy insect netting. But once you've put this up, we take it down every year and we store it and we bring it back out season after season, year after year. I've had the same insect netting for 5 years now and I've used it. So it's one of those things that's going to cost an investment. It's going to cost something. but it is going to be super, super effective. And it, again, it's just that physical barrier. And so I have found that stopping it at the forefront is perfect, because we know with some of those cabbage moths, man, some of those caterpillars, it only takes a day or two and they have done a lot of damage. And so this is what my setup looks like. I'll start on my brassicas in my greenhouse, or maybe you're starting them inside and maybe you've brought them out. Because I'm starting in a greenhouse and the sides are up and things like that, I mean, I just find that the pests will find them. Those specific things, the brassicas in particular, I can deal with a lot of pests. So before I plant them in the ground, I will hit them on the underside of their leaves with BT. We're going to talk about BT in a second. So if you're scratching your head wondering, what is she talking about? We're going to get there in just a second. And I will go ahead and I will spray these in case there's any sort of eggs I can't see or anything hiding in some sort of crevice. And then I will plant them in the soil and I will immediately put the insect netting on them. The insect netting does not come off except when I get ready to harvest. You can see I've got drip irrigation laid. And so that's nice. It's just as a drip. You can water through it. It is going to sag some, but even if you just lift it up and you are having to water, most of the time you're probably not going to see a massive issue with that. One of the biggest things when it comes to this is how to use it and how to make sure that it is installed correctly, right? And so you can secure it with clamps, which is what we do. We just buy bulk clamps and we secure it to the sides of our bed. If you're doing some sort of in-ground gardening, you can secure it with some sort of bricks, cement blocks. You could do sandbags. There's a lot of different things you could do, but you want to make sure that every nook and cranny is covered so that you're not getting any sort of issues. And so some of the best crops that netting is good for is those brassicas. That is one of the main things. In fact, here we only grow brassicas throughout the fall and the winter because the pests are even so much worse in the springtime. And we are implementing this and it completely alleviates the issue. Sometimes root crops are real susceptible to pests and insect netting works super great. Obviously those trailing things, right? So anything you're wanting to trellis or grow vertically, it's not going to work well for that. I have found too, though, on my bush beans, we've got grasshoppers pretty bad, which are just like a nuisance and they can ruin some of those bean pods. This works great. So it is going to be dependent on the crop that you're growing. But I feel like oftentimes, we're dealing with things like aphids, caterpillars, cabbage moths, things like that. And when you do this, it really is just reducing your need to spray, which in my opinion, I'm always going to tell you guys to go to this. So once you've addressed the soil, you've chose the right varieties, you're rotating your crops, say maybe you still need that extra line of defense, I think this is a great one to implement. And now I do want to just chat with you guys about products because I've kind of shared with you guys my methods. And I'll be honest, aside from the BT that I spray on those fall brassicas, it has been a long time since I've had to, I almost, in my opinion, would rather just rip it up than have to treat it, especially just because there's pros to cons to all of it. And so once you can kind of put in those other practices of crop rotation and netting, and you do all that first, then these are only the things you have to, if it's going to be the life or death of the root plant, right? If it's oh, okay, I need to treat it or I'm going to have to pull it. That's when I would say this is when you can start implementing and including some of these things. And so for me, the only product that I will use on farm is this BT. It is an organic option. It's a naturally occurring bacteria that's going to target caterpillars specifically, which is a lot of the pests that I am dealing with, without harming those beneficial insects when they're used directly, right? So that's definitely a pro to using this, is it is super, super effective. And it's also safe for those beneficial insects. The only con, and this is going to be with any natural option, in life, period. Not just when it comes to the garden. If with your own holistic methods and principles in life, if it is a natural option, it's not a quick fix. It is going to take time to really address the problem. So that could be one of the cons, is that you are going to have to reapply it frequently, but it is less invasive, and I would still rather apply more often, and knowing that it didn't have a harsh impact on the environment and the things around me. So if you were to treat, I would only feel good saying, BT, I've used it, it's effective. And in my opinion, I haven't even had to reapply it because I'm implementing so many of the other things. I'm making sure my soil's top notch. I am rotating my crops. I'm putting that insect netting on there. So that one spray is sufficient for me. And that is the goal, right? Is that we become less reliant on having to do some of these other inputs, and we can really just nurture the soil and choose the right varieties. And then we have neem oil, which you might notice it is on the organic option. And it is marketed all the time as a organic friendly option in your garden. But I have found that it is extremely problematic, and it's super controversial in the organic gardening world. It's a broad spectrum. You can mix it up and spray it. But it's a broad spectrum, and so that means that it's going to kill the beneficial insects along with the pest. Especially bees can be harmed by this. Now, we have hives on our farm that we have centrally located to all of our gardens, right? And so if I am spraying something to keep my plant alive, but it is killing my bees that are then pollinating on my plants, and it really is just, it makes no sense. And so even though neem oil is technically an organic option, or it's marketed that way, I really would encourage you guys to steer clear of it because of the harmful impact that it has on bees specifically. And those are something that we really want to nurture, attracting those into our gardens. And they play such a vital role in that ecosystem that we're trying to create. And then the next thing is diatomaceous earth. I have not used this often because of, I know my zone and I know my climate, and where I am, we just don't deal with these types of things very often. But this is going to be a very effective method for those soft body pests, okay? And so for things like aphids, things like slugs, it's going to be very, very beneficial. You can put it around the base of the plant. Now, one of the pros is that it's non-toxic to humans or pets. Maybe you have cats, dogs, things like that frequent your garden. You don't have to worry about any of that. You can distribute it with your hands, which usually I do. I don't feel the need to put on any sort of glove or anything like that. The con to that would be it's ineffective when it gets wet. You do have to reapply it. So if you have drip irrigation, be mindful that maybe you're putting that on in between your watering times. If you've got a garden outside and you applied it and it got wet, you're going to have to reapply. Again, just know with any sort of organic natural option, it's not a one and done. You're going to have to keep applying these things quite frequently, especially if the goal and the hope would be that you would target it and you would attack it so quickly early on that it only takes one or two uses versus waiting for an infestation to take place. Then it's going to be a lot harder to treat, and you might actually just have to pull your plant. And then there are non-organic products, right? And these are going to lend to immediate results. You're going to immediately see the effectiveness of that product, but you're going to harm not only the insects, but your soil health. And that's something that I really want you guys to be mindful of, is using those products not only hurt the ecosystem that you're creating in your garden, but they are depleting the soil of its nutrients and its health. And we know that that is making it that much more susceptible to pests, which makes you much more reliant on having to still keep spraying these things. And so I just wanted to chat through real quick organic versus non-organic. I think it kind of speaks for itself, but organic products are going to be a lot safer for pollinators and the environments and the ecosystem as a whole in each of your gardens. And it's actually going to support your long-term soil health. So you're not going to be depleting your soil health, harming your soil health whatsoever. The con to that is that you're going to have to do it more frequently. You're definitely going to have to do it more frequently, and you're going to probably see slower results, especially if you're waiting until the problem is super present, right? But I cannot recommend it enough, just for the environmental safety, just for it being safe for your insects, everything like that. If you are having to spray as a last result, choose something that you at least know is safe for all of the pollinators. And then the non-organic products, you're going to have that immediate effectiveness. You are going to have the results last longer, so you're not going to have to apply them as frequently. But again, it is harmful to the pollinators, to your soil health. Sometimes we're even at risk for the chemicals, and you have to have some sort of safety, gloves or something like that when you are applying it. But I will say, even if you're choosing an organic option, read the labels, make sure that you're doing it safely, because sometimes even an organic option, if applied incorrectly, can have a negative impact on the pollinators and things like that. So one of the things I like about BT and how I use it is it hooks onto my water hose, and you can adjust a knob at the top, and so it sprays out with water. And so it already does kind of that dilution and dilutes it for you, which I really like, because I've never had an issue of worrying about, sometimes people will put something on their plants and it burned up their plants because the ratio wasn't right. And so those are also some things that you'll have to be mindful of. So when it comes to what is your organic pest control plan? If you're thinking, I don't know what to do, I want to get a head start on my season, this is exactly the action plan that I'm going to recommend for you guys. Number one, you've got to start with healthy soil. This is literally going to reduce the problem from the ground up. So when in doubt, always revert back to your soil. When in doubt, always test your soil. When in doubt, always amend your soil. Like, soil should always be your first line of defense, the first go-to, the first thing that you evaluate if pests are starting to get out of control, because you can literally address the issue from the ground up. And then number two, choosing those pest-resistant varieties. This is going to help just your your plant reduce its vulnerability to pests really taking them over, which is obviously something we don't want. There's nothing more devastating than have started these seeds, or maybe you're sourcing them out and you're buying them and you put them in the ground and pests just take them over. So I really hope you guys will be mindful when you're choosing varieties this year, because I've tested it myself. I've done the trials, and I promise you it makes a massive difference. Also, maybe just choose when you're growing those. So I live in a zone where I can grow brassicas in the spring and in the fall. But because the pests are so bad, I choose not to grow them in the spring and just grow them in the fall, because I know eventually the temperatures are going to drop enough to where I'm not even having to worry about that issue. Just the bugs are going to come dormant, and I just don't have a lot of the pest pressure. So maybe even think about that with some of your root crops. If you have a lot of issues with pests in the spring, could you grow it in the fall? And do that. I really recommend that. Number three is going to be rotating your crops, because again, this is how we break those pest cycles. So super important, super easy to implement. And then insect netting, I think, is just so great. This is going to really just get you kind of a head start, if you will, because you're preventing the problem before it ever becomes a problem, which for me is super proactive, and I absolutely love it. And then, of course, lastly, you can resort to sprays like BT only when it is absolutely necessary. Building a resilient garden is going to take time. That's just the truth. Year after year, you're going to nurture your soil more. You're going to become more confident. You're going to know how to combat against some of these pests more naturally. But these foundational steps are going to help you manage your pest effectively, in my opinion, without having to be reliant on going to the store, or worse than that, buying those harmful sprays that are just not going to be good for anyone. So I cannot thank you guys enough. And I really just want to remind you of one thing. I know we're going to jump into Q&A in just a second, but I want you guys to remember that organic pest control, when it comes to managing your gardens organically, it isn't about finding a quick fix. Okay. There are quick fits out there, but they definitely come at a cost. I really encourage you guys, think and ask yourself, plan, how can you create a healthy, balanced ecosystems where you have the upper hand and your pests don't? And so I really just encourage you guys, think about that. What can you do? Can you implement any of these things? You might not be at a place where you can implement that whole action plan, but if you can implement one thing, start with the soil. Implement that. Maybe the next year you start finding some of those varieties that are really going to work for you. Maybe you can start incorporating crop rotation with that. But just know Rome wasn't built overnight. It's going to take you becoming more confident. And now this is something I don't even think about. I never once even think about pests when it comes to the garden, because I know I'm doing all the things in my garden. I'm implementing all those things, prioritizing all the things to where pests, honestly, I can sit here and say, are just not even an issue for me. And I hope after implementing some of these things in your own gardens, you'll find that they just aren't an issue for you either. So thanks.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you so much, Jill. I
Absolutely.
really appreciated that. I really like the emphasis on the soil and getting back to the roots. You know, we like to say that the pest isn't the problem. It's a sign that there's a problem.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And usually the problem is at the root somewhere.
Deeper down. No
Deeper
no
down.
pun intended. There. All right, very good. Yeah, let's open up for some question and answers. We got a lot of questions here.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to make it through all of them, but one that came up over and over and over was, where do you like to get your soil tested?
Yeah, so we tested at our local extension office for a really long time. What I have done the last 2 seasons is Redmond Agriculture has at-home tests. And so we buy these at-home tests and we test ours from like the south beds, the west beds, the east beds. Like we test them all kind of in groups that way. One of the things I really like about Redmond's versus if you've never gotten your soil tested, you're going to, and say you go to your extension office and then they'll give you the report and they hand it to you and you're literally like a deer in headlights, right? I remember the first soil tests I got. Yeah, there you go. Oh, you sell them in the store.
We do. Yeah, this was completely
didn't even know that. Okay, perfect.
Unplanned.
It's totally
I did not
unplanned.
know
Okay.
that Will was going to say the Redmond soil test kit.
Yes. So one thing I love about this, and in fact, I teach a gardening class at my kids' homeschool co-op. We just tested this, and it was so great because one, I got the test kits. I went out with the kids. We did it. We collected the soil. We wrote on there. I did it all online. I mailed it. And then they emailed me the results back. And not only did they email me the results back, they put it in a way of like, all right, this is what we're deficient in. This is what I recommend. This is how much I recommend per that bed. And I could go and I could teach that to the kids in a way that was very broken down and in a way that you could understand it. And so that's one of the things that I really love. If you've never tested your soil before, this is going to make it extremely user friendly. And so the fact that I got emailed the results, it tests way more too. So if you go to your local extension office, they're just going to test for NP and K, but they're not going to test for any of those other micro, macro nutrients. You're going to have to pay extra for that. And one thing I liked about Redmond's is that it had calcium, it had magnesium. It had everything I could possibly want, very user friendly. So that's what I would recommend.
So a question just along with that line, Cindy says, how many samples do you do if you have multiple garden plots and raised beds? Do you do a sample from every single one? Do you mix them together?
Yes, so you can mix them together, and that's what I would recommend. If you have some in your same zones, I recommend kind of zoning out your gardens based off of what I talked about, like north, south, east, and west beds. And we will collect one you want to dig down pretty deep, and it will show you that, like, stick your trowel down there and make sure it's at least 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches deep, but then mix it together. And that can be mixing it in a bowl and, some sort of 5-gallon bucket. You don't need that much, but mix it together to where you collectively know that section of your garden, most of the soil is going to be that and then send that off. It comes in like a little bitty cup. And so that's what I would recommend if you have a larger area. So in my high tunnel, we've got 2 really long beds and then 4 shorter beds in the middle. I actually test each of these beds because I'm growing something different in all of them. Soil is so important to us that I want to know, like, if I can even adjust to one slight thing that's going to make the outcome better, I want to adjust that. And that might be slightly different than the bed right next to it based off of the crops that I was growing. So if like I know those test kits, if you have a lot, I would just say group together where they are, zone your garden off to where you have those different zones, and then mix the soils together.
Awesome.
Very
Perfect.
good.
Next question here.
Melanie's wondering, is it a possibility that last year's pests have overwintered in our raised beds?
For sure. Yeah, that is definitely something. I know I always am like, how the heck? Like, we just started the season, but no, they will definitely burrow down in there over winter, like they are just waiting. And so that's why it is really important to make sure that you are implementing crop rotation. That way, when spring comes around and they're ready to find something to feed off of, they no longer can do that. You've really broken that cycle, and you just kind of keep tricking them if you can. That's the goal.
Good deal. Melissa here has a question about spider mites. She has a big infestation of spider mites, says that it looks like columns of spider webs inside her pole beans. Do you have any experience with spider mites or any tips?
I don't. I've never dealt with spider mites. Again, I would probably try to look at varieties, make sure that there's good. I know with like pole beans, we tend to plant super dense, but that's also something too to be mindful of, is like making sure where you're planting it, treating the soil. I think when it comes to stuff like that in a high tunnel, I always first question the environment, because it's so much, just the whole environment's different, right? It's a lot more humid in there. So I really try to be mindful of the varieties that I'm growing in my high tunnel. You'll actually find certain places will sell greenhouse varieties as well, because they have adjusted for that humidity and how the climate is different and how your vegetable is going to grow different. And so I would even try that, figure out what variety it is that you're growing. And I grow the Provider is the variety that I grow. I do grow it in my high tunnel. I grow it on the outside bed where it has the best amount of airflow instead of growing it in the center. And then I will rotate that with my other bed as well. And I find that helps.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Another question here. All right, Sue here says, how do you know which varieties are less disease prone? Does it say on the package? Because you're talking about those hybrid resistant varieties.
Yeah, it does. So if you are shopping, online or in a seed catalog, it will say, one, if it's a hybrid, you kind of have to know that it's already going to be pest and disease resistant, but it will state that. It'll state that it is resistant to that. And that is how I really nail down and figure out which ones I grow. And I'm pretty particular about this. And last year, we were growing greenhouse varieties that were pest and disease resistance, and I'm harvesting off of like very few plants. I don't have massive areas. We're very small scale growers. I was harvesting 90 pounds a week without even thinking about it. Week after week after week after week. And another thing too is, if you are dealing with those, succession plant, go ahead and have another one in line. So while I could leave my cucumbers, so I grow the Katrina cucumbers, while I could leave them and they'll produce more, I know that my plant's taking on a little bit of stress later in the season. I can tell it. I can tell that it's not as vibrant as it was. I could leave it in there and it would still technically produce, but because the plant's a little stressed out, it's already put on a ton, it's going to be more susceptible to pests. So what I have done is I've started another round of cucumbers in my greenhouse, or you can do this inside if you have grow lights. And when I noticed that those signs of stress are taking on, which I know is going to cause my plant to be more susceptible to pests, I'm going to go ahead and plant that next round so that I just don't have to worry about that either. And so that's another thing too, if you're dealing with a lot of these diseases, Try to succession plant out and plant obviously that second round before you know your first round is done. So you always have a continuous harvest. If you don't know, seed time will do all that work for you. And so it's great to be able to do that. And that's one of the main things I look at too, is how can I succession plant to make sure my plants are as healthy and productive as they can be for a longer period of time.
Great, thank you. Janine is asking about Japanese beetle. She says, I know soapy water, but is there any other advice?
So that has been the only thing I've done, soapy water. And another thing too, I will tell people all the time, your best pest control is this right here. You've got to have eyes on your plants. And I encourage you. So we've got a day for everything in our garden because I want a system for everything. That's just the type of person that I am. And so we have certain days where we're pruning and trellising, and certain days that we're cultivating, and certain days that we're doing pest management. We're making sure that we're feeding our soil, we're checking our plants. And so as soon as you see them, I cannot encourage you enough. Pick them off. Same if you're growing any sort of squash and you have vine borers, anything like that, it's going to be one, I would just encourage you not to grow it. And I have found that some of those things I don't grow. We buy from the farmer's market. You will not see me grow a summer squash. If I do, come check on me, because it's not worth the pest that it attracts. And it's too labor intensive going in, picking those off, and they become so invasive to everything else in your garden. And so soapy water is a really great solution. Eyes on your plant, daily, weekly, hand picking as much as you can as well.
Awesome advice there. Love it. We have a question here from Jennifer who says, what about things that are perennial, asparagus, rhubarb? This was related to when you were talking about crop rotation and rotating things around. How do perennials fit into that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. One, you would really tap into soil health, because you know that they're going to deplete the soil year after year of the same nutrients. So make sure that you are amending appropriately. Also, if you can add any sort of different companion plants as well that you know would deter from the type of pest that they got. But even on those, so we have established blackberries, we've got established asparagus, we have got different berries and things like that. We just really put an emphasis on amending those beds. And I have found too, in my experience, those things do just naturally not deal with pests like a tomato or an eggplant or a cucumber, in my experience. So that might be something just zone specific as well, but still make sure you're nurturing the soil, you're adding in amendments, and try to plant some sort of beneficial plants around it too if you're dealing with any sort of pest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we've got a couple of questions here about polyculture. You know, if you're growing several different crops together in the same bed, more or less side by side, how important is crop rotation if you're doing that?
Yeah, I would say it's still important. And I do that. In fact, in the springtime, we will grow pole beans on a trellis, and then, which is obviously really tall. And then I've got celery, which is going to be a little bit taller. And then I've got my spinach, and then I have spinach or salanova mix, and then I'll have root veg in the center. So we're kind of staggered at different heights, right? And that works really well because I can cram a lot of food into 3-foot spacing. And so at that point, I'm not really thinking about, are these companions, are they working well with each other? I'm just thinking about, can I fit these? What are their different heights and things, their different requirements? Some are going to grow tall, some are going to grow out. And then again, if I were to interplant like that, I'm just going to swap that bed and do that the opposite side the next time. And you can still rotate those out. Again, I would say anytime you're pulling something from the soil, right? Anytime you're harvesting something, amend it. It's just like a really good practice. So if you harvest all your carrots and say maybe you've planted them underneath your tomatoes, just throw amendments down. Even if you don't get it tested, it's most of the time, minus like root crops and things like that, you're never going to go wrong with worm castings. You're never going to go wrong with some sort of organic matter. Azomite's just going to help all those trace minerals in your soil. So that's one of those things too. If you're growing multiple crops in one bed, when you harvest, just put it down before you plant again.
Love it.
Yeah. Good.
Good deal. Okay, one last question before we wrap up here, and that is how many times, I think I put the wrong one up here actually. I can't find it, but I'll tell you what it was. It was how many years, no, it is this
That
one,
is
yeah.
it, yeah.
How many years go by before you can move a crop back to the same place when you're doing crop rotation?
Yeah, so some people might have other opinions on them. I usually, so say I guess when I'm planting, it depends on the crop because some of these crops I'm planting twice a year versus tomatoes I'm planting once a year. But I will switch it for 1 year and it'll go back the next, especially in my small high tunnel. I'm flopping out between the cucumbers and the tomatoes, but then after that cycle is gone, the next year I'm having to flop them right back, which is why I personally, especially if you're growing in a small space, cannot preach the importance of soil health enough. And even though it's just that year cycle, because I'm nurturing my soil so well all throughout the year, I find that I'm not dealing with a lot of those issues. But I would say, even if you're working in like a square, just rotate it all. And when you get back, start that whole pattern again and just make sure that you're mending each bed properly. And I think you'll be really surprised.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Everyone, please give Jill a hand in the
Yes.
chat.
Yeah.
Has this been helpful for you? Let us know. And Jill, any final words you want to share with people before we wrap up?
Yeah, I want to just thank you guys so much. I hope that this encourages you. I know so many things in the garden sometimes can get us discouraged, especially when it comes to pest. And so I just want to encourage you guys, you can manage it organically. If you have questions, send me a message. Let me troubleshoot with you. I'm happy to do that. But yeah, keep feeding your soil. If there's anything you take away from this, I really want you to remember that the soil is the life and longevity of your gardens. So we have to nurture that first. And if you can really view it that way as the immune system for your garden, I think you will be blown away at how abundant your gardens are this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Great.
Yeah, great presentation.
Mhm.
Look forward to next time.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you. Bye-bye. All right, we are so thankful that Jill was able to jump on with us today, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yes. So I see so many people saying thank you in the chat. Great session on dealing with insect pests in the garden. And as you know, as you've probably heard in the many other sessions, our mission here at Seed Time is to make gardening and farming easier for you. That's what these summit sessions are about. We want to give you the training, the tools, the resources, and the expert insights to go put these into practice in your garden. So take these sessions and use them in your garden. Knowledge is one thing, but going and actually applying it is where you get the benefits from it. Many people wonder about the replays. We do have replays available for a limited time. There's a link up at the top of the page. And so you can view those through Tuesday of next week for free. Otherwise, many people also wonder about how can I own the summit? Because if you are like me, we are on all of these sessions, so we have to be here. But my regular life, I would never be able to listen to every single session of a summit like this. And if you would like to own it, so you can come back and catch the ones that you miss, or be able to come and review over and over, then we do have something special for you today during this summit experience. And that is that we are offering $100 off lifetime access to the Seed to Harvest Summit recordings. So here's what's included with your Seed to Harvest Summit recordings. We have two packages, a platinum package and a gold package. And with both of them, you get lifetime online access to all of the recordings of the summit, including this one that we just did with Jill. And we're going to also split those up into MP3 audio versions. You can take them on the go. You can listen to them in your garden and podcast style, or on your way to work in the car. We're going to also split out transcripts of them. So if you're someone that likes to read, this is going to be a great way to consume the summit content and other sessions that you may have missed. And then we're also going to throw in the live chat logs of the sessions to bring in that community feel, even though it's going to be the recordings afterwards. There's a lot of great information in the chat. There's people in here that have been sharing their favorite soil test places that they like to go get their soil tested. There's all kinds of resources that all of you all are adding value to the summit as well. So we're going to throw those in. Then at the platinum level, we're going to take all of that and put it onto a physical flash drive and ship it to your door so you can have a physical copy and know that this information is not just somewhere on the internet online somewhere, but you have a physical copy in hand that you can use and reference over and over again. In addition to that, here at Seed Time, we not only want to give you expert insights and tricks and knowledge, but we also want to give you the tools to put it into practice. And so we built a garden planner called Seed Time. And with either of these packages, you will get 1 year of free upgraded level access to Seed Time as a bonus. So it's a bundle. You get the recordings of the summit and you get upgraded access to Seed Time at the same time. If you already have upgraded access to Seed Time, you get an extension of your upgraded access to Seed Time. So either way, it's a win. And with both of them, you get 1 year of upgraded access. Seed Time is a garden planner that makes it extremely easy to know what to do and when to do it in your garden. So if you struggle with guesswork and trying to figure out what to do and when to do it all the time in your garden, flying by the seat of your pants, this is for you because you get a calendar based on your location. You enter your location, it pulls your frost dates. You can then add crops to your calendar by clicking the Add Green Crop button up at the top right. Choose the crop you want to grow, and Seed Time will automatically suggest the seeding time, transplanting time, harvest time for those different crops. You can click schedule and it will schedule it into your calendar at the suggested timing, but then here's the power of it. It's all adjustable. So you can add succession plantings. You can move those plantings around in the calendar. You can add spring plantings, fall plantings, summer plantings. You can plan out your whole season. And then once you have it planned out in the calendar, you can come over to the layout planner and lay out your garden visually. In the layout planner, you can then take those crops and place them where they're going to grow based on the time they'll actually take up space in your garden plan. And you can move through time. Watch the little green slider here and the crops down below as we move through time, and you can see the crops coming in and out of the garden based on the times that you have planned for them to take up space in the garden. Doing this allows you to see where there are gaps, where you could put another crop in or a cover crop and really maximize the space in your garden. But not only that, really maximize the yield in your garden as well. And then on top of that, with the calendar, you also get a task list that automatically pulls from the calendar. So on a daily or weekly basis, you come in, check off your tasks, adjust your plantings on the fly. And then we also get a journal where you can log your journal entries, pictures, link them to your plantings. You can search, filter them. It's a great place to keep yourself organized. You'll also get access to the Seed Time Classroom, the community, the store, and discounts in the store because you actually get 20% off all seed orders in the Seed Time store as an upgraded member of Seed Time, which is pretty cool too. Along with upgraded level access and Seed Time, at the Platinum package, we have a few extra bonuses for you. One is 1 year of free bonus online access to our home gardening course. It's $120 value with 12 modules, over 18 hours of video training with worksheets and teaching and demonstration videos going into more depth, walking you through step-by-step how to do different things in your garden, like how to trellis your plants, how to water your plants, how to start your own starts that thrive, how to transplant them successfully without killing your plants, and how to extend your season. So much more packed into that home gardening course. And you get 1 year, 100% for free to be able to go walk through that course and take the knowledge and implement it throughout the entire year. In addition to that, you'll also get bonus sponsor session recordings. These are sponsor sessions that are not available and aren't being aired in the main portion of this summit. Example of that is the microbiometer, who walks you through the microbiological life in your soil. And not only that, how you can use a simple little testing toolkit to understand and test the microbiological life in your soil. Very cool. Diego has one on season extension, talking about tunnels and covers and a comprehensive guide of how you can protect your plants and extend your season. And then in addition to that, you will also get bonus exclusive unaired garden trainings. Like, for example, Michael Kilpatrick, friend of ours, has done one on growing ginger and turmeric. These are not aired anywhere else in the summit. It's exclusive to this platinum package of the recordings. And another one, James Fry, shows how he grows food 2 times faster in his Revolution garden beds compared to a regular garden bed on the left-hand side there, and all of the intricacies of why and how that works. It is pretty cool, if I'm going to be honest. So you may be wondering, how can I grab my lifetime access? How can I own the summit itself? At the platinum level is $298 at full price, but for a limited time during the summit, you can get $100 off for just one payment of $198. Or the gold level, gold is $198 at full price, but once again, during the summit, you can get $100 off for just one payment of $98. So if you're ready to get started, click the link on this page, or there's a pinned note at the top of the chat. Go to seedtoharvestsummit.com/lifetime and grab your summit recordings while you can, while this discount is still running. We do want to also note that we do back it by our 30-day money-back guarantee. So either Seed Time makes it so much easier to plan your garden and you get tons of value from this summit, or we do back it up within the first 30 days. Shoot us an email. We've got your back 100%. Now is the time to take your garden to the skies. Like Linda, who says, I've never had such great vegetables. Scott, who says, by far the best garden ever. And my crazy garden has been amazing this year and grew in size and abundance. Joelle, so much produce. Kim, there's a very noticeable difference in the amount of fruitage this year compared to last year. This is the types of experience that we want you to have coming away from this summit. Stephen said that using Seed Time helped his planning time go from about a week down to about a day. Alexis saved me weeks of work in just a few days. So we want to not only save you a ton of time, but give you the expert insights and training and the tools to go put it all into practice and to grow your wildest, highest yielding garden that you've ever experienced in your entire life. That's what we're here for. We're here to make your life easier. And if you'd like to be a part of that, go grab your summit recordings while you can, while this discount is still running. We're going to jump in and see if there's any last minute questions here. Lisa has one here. It says, is there a way to have your garden plan and Seed Time checked over by someone who knows about companion planting and shading? Can the AI help with that? AI can't help with that yet. And we may just offer that at some point with Seed Time. We do not currently have a consulting branch like that at the moment, although we do have an elite membership where we have monthly live meetings where we could do something kind of like that. All right. I think we're going to, Dad, am I missing anything? Is there anything else that we should touch on?
Eileen's asking about the cheat sheet. I'm not.
Where is the cheat sheet? Very good question. Eileen, if you're talking about it really depends what cheat sheet you're talking about. Yeah. If you're talking about the pest cheat sheet that we gave away to everyone who registered, you should see a link to that on the confirmation page when you registered. You can email us, support@seedtime.us, and we can help you find that. All right. All right. Sounds good. We're going to wrap it up for this session, and we will be back very soon, top of the hour, for last session of the day with Brianna Bosch. Brianna is going to be sharing about the plastic-free garden, natural mulching solutions to combat weeds. It's going to be a great session. So
Sounds good.
Not going to want to miss it. All right. We'll see you there soon. Bye-bye.